Let's head to the NASDAQ market site where BNN's Chitra Nawbat standing by with Wolfgang Koester, CEO and co-founder of data analytics company FiREapps.
Global conflict and economic crisis go hand in hand with currency risk. This is the environment we're in. And to talk about this, we have Wolfgang Koester, the CEO of FiREapps, a data analytics currency risk management company who provides technology for some of the largest multinational corporations. Wolfgang, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
So let's talk Ukraine and Russia. The EU is having an emergency meeting on the Ukraine. Companies have operations, transactions over there. What risks are they facing?
Well, the risks that we help them understand and manage is what does it mean to their revenues, to their gross margins, to their operating expenses, what business are they doing, and that all is translated by currencies. So at the top line, you could all of a sudden have, with a depreciation of a ruble, whatever business you were doing is all of a sudden valued 30% less unless you manage that risk properly. Now that has effects not only as you're doing business in Russia, obviously in Ukraine, but also then how is that going to impact your business as you're doing it in Europe, for example.
And so in terms of, can you give us a sense of some of the types of companies that you're advising, and specifically what are some of the solutions that you're providing?
Yeah, I mean, we have large corporates that range from the Pfizers and Accentures to $100 million revenue company, quite frankly, so the breadth is quite significant. What we have them do is actually we provide technology that gives them the visibility, transparency, and equally important, timeliness to actually understand their exposures. Once they understand it, then they can have processes to mitigate that risk. What we're seeing these companies do is move away from 5 or 10 of their largest exposures to actually managing their entire portfolio of currencies because they never know where the next surprise comes from.
And you know, when you talk about providing that visibility, companies have these end-to-end processes. They've got physical operations, they have client transactions, they may have investments.
Right.
So the technology solution that you provide, is it enterprise-wide currency risk management?
That's exactly what it is. It is you can understand it from an enterprise point of view, and then you can dig down into however you want to see your business. So you manage it from an enterprise point of view, but you could still say, look, I still want to manage the specific countries to bottom lines, but at the end, it's going to translate into the share price, and it's going to impact your earnings. That's where that's going to be. So it's enterprise-wide, but you can dig into the data and manage it as you wish.
But how are you actually advising companies to in terms of shifting to take that approach? Because a lot of companies are managed very silo.
Yes. So we really have to go to talk to, quite frankly, the CEO, CFO, group treasurer at the levels and say, look, understand your exposures. You have a global risk. You need to understand all those exposures and manage that through. That's often a change. A lot of people say, look, we don't have the technology, the visibility, and the access to do it. Therefore, we're going to focus on what we think we can do. The world has seriously changed over the last decade, quite frankly, but certainly last 5 years as well. That's very doable today. So you see companies like a Pfizer doesn't really have impacts. Well, you saw Colgate-Palmolive having significant impacts last quarter, 9 cents. Analysts and investors were all over this. They want to understand it. They're asking tougher questions about this.
Well, talking about that, let's go shift to home, Canada. Canada had furious and fast depreciation of the Canadian dollar in 2013 to the surprise of many. What were some of the impact that you were seeing to Canadian companies and some of your clients, perhaps?
Yes, I think that surprised everybody, right? Canada hasn't been over the last 3-4 years in the top 5 from actually impacting value of companies. Well, they all of a sudden slid with Brazil right into the top in this last quarter. So what we've seen these companies is have significant revenue impacts as well as gross margin impacts. The companies like Celestica just showed it in their margins impact, the G&Ks, the Smart Technologies. These are companies that are significantly impacted by all of a sudden what people didn't expect is depreciation of the currency. So they're all saying, well, the Canadian dollar is going to go up. We're very happy with parity. Well, like anything, things move. And that's an indication of what people have to do. They can't start thinking about only one currency. They have to think about all their currencies. In this case, it hit quite quickly home for this quarter, probably for the beginning as well of this quarter, about what the value of these companies are. And it's going to hurt.
But you know, getting into more of the data analytics, how can a company use that data analytics more specifically to manage that risk or even perhaps Canadian currency risk going forward?
So first and basic problem is actually getting the access to the data, understanding where is all that data, having access, and once you have that access, then you take it through analytics and say, what are the actual impacts? I talked to a German company early this morning, CFO, and he said, well, we're trying to figure out what a 30%, to go back to the previous part, Ukraine, what a 30% now hit in Ukraine, what does that mean? And we're struggling to figure that out. Technology today, you'd be going on the technology saying, what if this price would go there, what does it mean to my company? I can say that like that. It also helps the CEOs when they're talking about reporting on their earnings to have the numbers there, because these analysts and investors are demanding answers to big surprises.
Wolfgang, we'll have to leave it there.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That was Wolfgang Koester, the CEO of FiREapps. Thanks for watching. I'm Chitra Nabat. This is the Business News Network.
Of course, that was Chitra Nabat at the NASDAQ with Wolfgang Koester, CEO of FiREapps.